This newest DARPA project is one part an evolution into true modern warfare, and one part an evolution from the very same creatures that have prowled the depths for so long. Its name is the Manta Ray, a new and futuristic underwater drone that intends to redefine the very nature of underwater warfare.
Navies spend billions of dollars trying to keep their projects out of sight. This one slipped because of a free app on a laptop. A flat, winged shape appeared at a United States pier, too big to ignore and too strange to explain away.
The change in saltiness in the water, but it is fascinating. But part of this is...
Can you explain that? How do they do that?
No.
It turned out to be a new kind of robot sub, built to glide out, vanish for months, and spy in silence. The moment the Manta Ray stopped being secret, most days people open Google Earth just to fly over their town. A smaller group uses it to watch the world's militaries. They scan ports, airfields, and Navy bases, looking for anything that was not there before. One of those quiet searches over the coast of California turned into a surprise. When users zoomed in on Naval Base Ventura County, near the city of Port Hueneme, they saw a shape at the pier that did not look like a tugboat, a patrol craft, or a normal submarine. In the satellite picture, the object sat in a small square basin cut into the pier. On both sides were ordinary support boats with narrow hulls and tall cabins. The thing in the middle was wide and flat, almost like a small airplane had been pressed down until it barely rose above the water. From above, it had a manta ray outline with a short central body and long swept wings that reached nearly from one side of the basin to the other. People saved screenshots and began to share them. Users who follow naval hardware went back through older Google Earth images of the same pier. In views from the previous year, the basin was either empty or held ordinary box-shaped boats. In the newer view, the water was dominated by this one huge flat craft. Using the scale bar, they guessed a wingspan of roughly 45 feet and a length of a bit over 30 feet, far larger than the workboats beside it. That size and outline told them this was not a small test boat or a hobby project. Very quickly, people began to match the satellite shot with official photos from the United States Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, better known as DARPA. Weeks earlier, DARPA and the company Northrop Grumman had quietly released a few pictures of a new uncrewed underwater vehicle called Manta Ray, basically a large robot submarine with no people on board. In those press images, the vehicle sat low in the water with the same manta-like outline and the same small tower rising from the center. When fans put the press shots next to the Google Earth view from Port Hueneme, the match was hard to ignore. The strange thing in the harbor was the Manta Ray prototype. That meant the project had already moved past early lab work and into serious sea trials. To understand why this matters, it helps to know what DARPA does. DARPA is a small part of the United States Defense Department that funds risky research projects. Since the 1950s, it has backed ideas that helped lead to stealth aircraft and the early building blocks of the Internet, among many other military and civilian technologies. It does not run factories or buy mass-produced weapons. It pays companies and labs to build first versions of unusual tools that might give the military an edge later. In the last few years, one of its main areas of interest has been the deep ocean. Manta Ray is one of those deep ocean efforts. In the early 2020s, DARPA announced a program with that name and said it wanted a new class of uncrewed underwater vehicles. The agency wanted a machine that could be sent far from home, stay in the ocean for a very long time without nearby human help, and still be ready to work when needed. To chase that goal, DARPA picked several teams, including Northrop Grumman and a group led by Metron. In the first phase, they drew up designs, ran computer models, and built small test hardware to show that their ideas could survive long missions in salt water. After those early checks, DARPA moved ahead with a full-scale build. Northrop Grumman received a contract to construct a complete Manta Ray vehicle. The company did that work at its facility in Annapolis, Maryland, a city with a long naval tradition on the east coast of the United States. At that stage, the public knew only that a strange new underwater drone was being built. But there were no clear pictures, and no real sense of how large the finished craft would be. That is what makes the Google Earth discovery so powerful. The image dates to late 2023, when the vehicle was being prepared for or recovering from ocean testing. All of this is happening while undersea security is becoming a bigger worry. In the last few years, explosions and damage to gas pipelines and undersea data cables in places such as the Baltic Sea have shown how fragile the seabed can be. Those hidden lines carry a huge share of the world's internet traffic and energy. At the same time, more countries are investing in submarines and seabed sensors. The Google Earth image froze that moment for anyone curious enough to see it. What the picture cannot show is the part that matters most, and that is what this new kind of spy drone can actually do once it leaves the pier and disappears under the waves. Under the skin, how the drone actually works and spies. In the water, this new drone does not act like a classic submarine at all. Instead of a fat, round tube with a big propeller at the back, it behaves more like a huge underwater glider with hidden storage space inside it. Its wings give it lift in the water the same way a glider's wings give lift in the air. The key trick behind any underwater glider is buoyancy. Buoyancy simply means how heavy or light something is compared to the water around it. If the craft makes itself just a little heavier than the water, it gently sinks. If it makes itself a little lighter, it gently rises. Gliders use this on purpose. As they sink, they tilt and glide forward. As they rise, they tilt again and glide forward even more. By repeating this gentle up and down motion, they can travel very far. Scientific gliders that use this method have already crossed whole ocean basins and stayed at sea for many months while sending back data. Manta Ray takes that idea and scales it up. Northrop Grumman says the drone has multiple buoyancy engines, which are pumps and tanks that let it fine-tune how heavy or light it is at different depths. By doing this, it can travel long distances at many different layers in the water while using very little power during most of the trip. When it needs a little extra push, it can switch on small propellers. It also has small fins, called control surfaces, that help it steer and stay steady in the water. That three-part mix of gliding, propellers, and fins gives the drone several gears to choose from. For long, boring stretches, it can creep along as a pure glider, letting the wings and buoyancy engines do almost all of the work. When it has to slip around a ridge on the seafloor, avoid a fishing net, or hold a steady position near something important, it can lean more on the propellers and fins for tight control. Moving like this gives it the same kind of reach that smaller ocean gliders have already shown, but with far more space inside for power systems and sensors. Saving power is not just about how the vehicle moves. It is also about what it does when it is not moving at all. This drone can anchor itself on the sea floor, shut almost everything down, and sit there in a kind of deep sleep until it is needed again. Only a few watch systems stay awake to keep track of time and listen for a wake-up command. When that command comes, the craft can start its pumps, adjust its buoyancy, let go of the bottom, and quietly glide away. There are signs that the power plan goes beyond just batteries and sleep modes. The Manta Ray program was set up partly to push new ways for underwater drones to manage and even refill their energy while at sea. DARPA and its partners talk about energy harvesting from the environment, which usually means using slow-moving parts, temperature differences, pressure changes, or ocean currents to pull a small but steady trickle of power from the water itself. One rival team in the same program has been testing a full-scale energy harvesting system, and public comments say the overall goal is to let vehicles like this top up their energy during very long missions instead of simply draining a fixed battery pack. The same focus on endurance shows up in the way the drone even reaches the area where it will work. Instead of wasting its own power crawling across an entire ocean, the vehicle is built so it can be broken into large sections, packed up, and shipped like regular cargo. DARPA and Northrop Grumman say the full-size prototype can be taken apart and loaded into 5 standard shipping containers. Those containers can travel by truck, train, or cargo ship to almost any friendly port. At that point, crews can reassemble the sections near the waterfront. and put the vehicle straight into the sea. That modular structure is not just useful on the first mission, it also makes the system easier to repair and upgrade over time. If one section holds most of the power hardware and another section holds most of the electronics, engineers can remove and swap out an old block without redesigning the whole machine. It is the same basic idea as changing a battery pack or a hard drive in a laptop, just stretched up to the size of an extra-large underwater vehicle. Over many years, the outer Manta-shaped shell can stay almost the same while the inner parts get smarter, more efficient, and more flexible. Inside that Manta-shaped shell, the craft carries much more than power systems and computers. DARPA explains that it is designed with several payload bays of different sizes and types. That means it has built-in storage rooms that can be filled with different tool sets depending on the job. From there, it is not hard to guess the kinds of equipment likely to ride inside. One obvious set is sonar gear, which uses sound pulses and echoes to map the seafloor or locate objects. Another likely package is a group of underwater microphones, sometimes called hydrophones, that listen for the unique noise patterns of ships and submarines as they pass. The drone can also carry environmental sensors similar to the ones used on scientific gliders, which measure water temperature, saltiness, oxygen, and chemical traces near undersea cables or pipelines. On top of that, it can release small bottom sensors and leave them on the seabed, then come back later to pick up their data. Put together, this turns the vehicle into a kind of modular spy truck that can be loaded with different kits for different tasks. For a machine that spends so much time alone, knowing where it is and where it is going is just as important as what it carries. That is where its navigation systems come in. The core method is something called inertial navigation. Instead of depending on satellites all the time, the vehicle uses motion sensors inside its body to track every change in speed and direction. By constantly adding up these small changes, it keeps a running picture of where it should be, even when it is deep underwater, where satellite signals do not reach. From time to time, it can rise close to the surface, take a quick position, fix from a satellite signal, correct its internal map, and then go back down. Talking to the outside world is just as tricky. Radio waves do not travel well through seawater, so underwater vehicles use sound for most long-range messages. This is called acoustic communication. The drone sends short-coded sound pulses that hold small chunks of data. These can be picked up by a ship, a floating buoy, or another robot. All of this only matters if the craft can turn those tools into real missions. One clear use is long-term seafloor mapping in areas where a Navy might need to operate later. The drone can glide back and forth in a careful pattern, using sonar and other sensors to build a three-dimensional picture of bumps, ridges, wrecks, and man-made structures on the bottom. Because it has no crew and moves slowly, it can keep doing this for weeks or months, filling in details that a quick ship survey would miss. When it is finished, planners have a detailed map of hiding spots, choke points, and routes long before any crisis starts. Another likely mission is quiet shadowing. In that role, the craft does not rush in very close to a target. Instead, it waits along expected routes and listens. When a valuable surface group, such as a carrier and its escorts, moves through a region, the drone can slip behind at a safe distance and follow using its glider motion and underwater microphones. Over time, it builds a library of sound patterns and movement habits for that group. A human crew on a submarine could do this as well, but a robot that does not need food, rest, or a trip back to port can keep the watch going for much longer and with less risk. There is also a quieter side to this story. Manta Ray can help with ocean science and even some commercial work when it is not on a pure military job. Its long range and long endurance make it a natural fit for collecting water data in rough or remote areas where crewed research ships are rare or too costly to send often. The same sensors that might guard a critical cable can also track harmful algal blooms, measure changing currents, or listen for whales and other sea life. Ocean glider fleets run by research groups already do this kind of work today, and a larger, tougher vehicle built on the same principles could push into even harsher waters. On its own, Manta ray is already a powerful spying tool. Later on, drones like this are meant to connect with other hidden systems under the sea, turning these long-lasting craft into the moving eyes and ears of a much larger underwater web. The underwater web. In recent years, navies have started to think about the ocean in a different way. For most of the 20th century, the focus was on single ships and single submarines sent out to do one job. Now, more and more planning is built around webs of unmanned machines that can be dropped into an area and left there for long periods of time. DARPA says its goal is to build distributed undersea networks of unmanned payloads and platforms that work together and support crewed ships. One of the main building blocks in that plan is a program called Hydra. Hydra is basically an underwater host. It is an unmanned platform that can hold standard payload modules and move them quietly to the area where they are needed. To do that, Hydra is built around a standard enclosure or capsule that can accept many kinds of payloads. Each module slots into this common shell. Inside the module, you might have unmanned underwater vehicles, also called UUVs or unmanned air vehicles, packed away until launch. These modules are meant to carry things like surveillance kits, mine-clearing equipment, or communications relays in the same sized container. When the capsule is locked into the host, Hydra provides power, data links, and a stable undersea platform, so the payload inside can do its job without needing a full crewed ship nearby. This modular design makes Hydra a force multiplier. Instead of sending a large crewed ship close to a defended coast and risking it in shallow water, a navy can push a Hydra host into that area and let it quietly release whatever mix of unmanned systems the situation needs. Planners can swap missions by swapping modules, not by building a whole new class of ship. Hydra is only one half of the picture. The other half lives on the seafloor in a project called Upward Falling Payloads. The name sounds strange, but the idea is straightforward. The program is built around deep ocean containers that sit on the seabed in forward areas for a very long time. Each container holds an unmanned payload and is designed to survive in the dark, high-pressure environment at the bottom of the ocean for years without maintenance. When it is time to use it, a remote command wakes the node up. The container then releases its payload, which rises toward the surface or toward shallower water, which is why DARPA calls it upward falling. These payloads are non-lethal, but they can still be very powerful. One pod might release a communications relay that pops up to link forces in an area where normal radio coverage is weak. Another pod might send up a sensor package that watches a narrow sea passage and logs which ships go through. While DARPA is pushing these research programs, the United States Navy is building its own fleet of very large underwater drones. The clearest example is a system called ORCA, short for Extra Large Unmanned Undersea Vehicle. ORCA is being built by Boeing and Huntington Ingalls Industries for long missions that last many months at a time. It is an autonomous submarine with a basic length of just over 50 feet, and the option to add a second section that stretches the total length to about 85 feet. With that extra section, it can carry around 8 tons of payload, which is a large amount of space for sensors, mines, or other mission kits in an unmanned craft. ORCA uses a hybrid system that combines diesel engines and lithium-ion batteries. When the vehicle is underwater, it runs on battery power and stays quiet. When it surfaces, it can start the diesel generator, recharge the batteries, and then dive again. This pattern lets ORCA travel about 6,500 miles on a single mission and stay deployed for several months without needing a support ship nearby. The first ORCA was formally delivered to the Navy near the end of 2023, and more vehicles are on the way. All of this fits into a bigger plan for how the United States fleet should look in the future. The goal is roughly 350 crewed ships and about 150 unmanned vessels added on top, for a total of around 500 hulls. From that viewpoint, Manta Ray looks less like a one-off gadget and more like an early member of a much larger family. It is one node in a wider undersea web that DARPA and the Navy have been quietly building for years. The next question is what that web does to older ways of fighting at sea, especially to the manned submarines that used to have the deep ocean mostly to themselves. Do underwater spy drones make submarines obsolete? Some experts now talk about see-through oceans, where cheap robots and smart sensors make it much harder for any submarine to stay hidden. Others say that is being overconfident, and that big submarines still do jobs no drone can safely take over yet. The truth sits somewhere between those poles, and it is changing faster than many governments are comfortable with. The idea of a transparent ocean sounds like science fiction, but it is based on a simple thought. If you scatter many listening devices in the water, put more sensors on ships and planes, add underwater drones that never get tired, and then give powerful computers all of that data, you can build a much clearer picture of what is moving under the surface. A study from Australia's National University warned that if this kind of sensor web keeps growing, deep oceans could become far more transparent by around the middle of this century, and ballistic missile submarines could be much easier to track than they are today. Other work on ocean transparency points in the same direction, warning that unmanned underwater vehicles designed to hunt submarines could slowly turn the old safe patrol zones into underwater ambush areas. We do not have to guess how robots can change old sea habits. There is already a real war that shows how fast unmanned systems can hurt a classic fleet. In the Black Sea, Ukraine has used small, crewless speedboats packed with explosives to go after Russian warships and fuel targets. These sea drones have hit major landing ships and forced parts of the Russian Black Sea Fleet to pull back from ports that once felt safe. More recently, Ukrainian naval drones also struck large oil tankers that were part of Russia's so-called shadow fleet, showing that even big commercial hulls are now at risk from cheap unmanned attackers. Those attacks take place at the surface, but the lesson is clear. When small, relatively cheap machines can threaten huge, expensive vessels, the old balance starts to tilt. That is the case against old-style submarine comfort zones. But there is a strong case on the other side too. Governments that actually run nuclear forces still talk about their ballistic missile submarines as their hardest asset to kill. A recent report from the U.S. government calls these boats the most survivable part of the country's three-part nuclear force, and notes that 14 Ohio-class submarines carry a large share of the deployed nuclear warheads. The Navy stresses that finding one of these boats in the open ocean is almost impossible, and that they are built from the keel up to be as quiet and slippery as engineers can make a steel ship. There is also a simple political clue. If undersea robots had already made submarines truly obsolete, the big nuclear powers would not be pouring money into new classes. Yet the United States is pushing ahead with the Columbia class to replace the Ohio boats. Britain is building the Dreadnought class, and France, Russia, and China are all updating their nuclear fleets. These are long programs that will run for decades. Their leaders read the same transparent ocean studies as everyone else, but so far they have decided that submarines are still worth the cost because, in their view, nothing else gives the same mix of stealth, heavy firepower, and flexibility. Thanks for watching. Now check out the videos popping up on screen for more unbelievable stories.